everybody, what's up? And welcome back to Rock Talk 101. I got a really good friend of mine who we haven't hung out in a very long time, but
30 years, 25?
30 some years, but she has now popped back into my life, and her name is Beowyn tellervo, and that's not her real name, that's her stage name, but we're gonna go with it.
Yeah, for those of you who know my real name, you know what it is, and that's
it keeps people from stalking her. So
what it does is it protects my family, particularly my son, and he's the one who came up with the name, not me. So
but anyway, we're talking here today because she manages bands, and one of the bands she manages is Momento Morti. Is that right?
Memento Morti, yeah.
Morti.
Yeah.
And
it's a moment of death.
Super cool band, and she actually let me listen to a track of theirs that they're working on. And it's a lot like some cool typo stuff. I mean, and I like typo.
Yeah, it's an old school, slow, intoxicating goth sound, like the 80s type goth. And it actually, that single is going to be released on April 30th.
Yeah, so there you go. And I heard a raw cut of it, which was really cool. It was really cool. So thanks for letting me listen to that, because it was pretty awesome. And I think they're can be a pretty kick-ass band.
New band, but seasoned musicians.
Yes. Guys that have played with a lot of other famous sons of bitches.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but we're going to talk about what she does, how she got into it, and we're going to reminisce a little bit about the old days. So I got my little cheat sheet notes here so I can kind of stay on track so we don't get too crazy, because her and I'll start talking.
I got mine.
And it'll be 3 hours later,
right?
And we'll be on a subject. So, how did you get into like the music scene, like the local music scene? Because we're both from Charlottesville. And that was like a local scene. And tell us like how you found, how did you find tracks? And how were you managing to get there in the early days?
In the early days, which would have been the early 80s, mid 80s, because I'm an old son of a bitch. I'll be 50 here in the next month or so. So I had an older friend who went to tracks a lot and was telling me about all the great bands and stuff there. And I, of course, was not old enough to drive yet, and so I would sneak out of the house and I would hitchhike to, sorry, Mom and Dad, I would hitchhike to Charlottesville, and I would get up there, and
30 years later, they're finding out what you were really up to.
Sometimes I could get in with certain bands that was an all-ages show, and other times I would have to sit out in the parking lot and listen to the music. And there were other venues, of course, that you could go to as well. And I got to know the bands, and I got to know the people in the scene. And then when I left home, of course, which was not long after that, kind of living on the streets and railroad bridges and things like that, and
the craziness
of
rock
that
music. Now, what was the scene like back then? I mean, like,
family all the way. It was absolute family. We all watched out for each other. We had each other's back, and it didn't matter if you were punk or skin or metal. It was.
We all crashed at everybody's houses.
We crashed at each other's houses. If you were sleeping on the streets or anything like that, you took turns watching each other's back, and somebody was always awake, and we all got food together and shared it, and everybody was there for each other.
It was definitely a big family. Everybody knew everybody, and everybody got along, and it didn't matter where you came from or what you did.
That's
it
right.
was all about the music, and
it was all about the music.
It was definitely all about the music. I remember going down to like the guys, like we actually, our band room was at a house, but a lot of guys had like little warehouses and stuff. And going down and
the practice spots.
And everybody would hang out and just, it was like a big social, big family get together, and it was just kind of something we did all the time,
Yeah. And there were not a lot of issues. Like, the only times there was an issue is if somebody disrespected somebody else, and that was it.
That was usually somebody that was new or didn't know everybody, and then everybody else who knew everybody would jump on the bandwagon of that.
Right. Or if somebody, especially if it was, like for me as a female, I didn't find out till a lot later usually, or sometimes later that night, but a lot of times it was a lot later that, everybody was my brother. Right. You know what I mean?
Oh, I know.
And if somebody came in and was like giving me eyes or something, I would find out later that they were politely escorted to the door. Right. They never made their way to me. So
now, fast forward a little bit. You went from trying to get into tracks, to how did you end up working at tracks?
because I was always there. I was always there.
What did you do there?
I was one of 2 female bouncers there. Sherry Fox was the other one.
I will say that she was a pretty badass back in the day, and she could
Bruiser.
Yep,
Jen named me that
yep,
too.
I
Bruiser.
remember that.
Yeah.
I do remember that.
Bigger trouble with girls than I ever had with guys. Guys were more resistant to hit a female bouncer, but there were a few that would. But you get into the melee.
She was a jeans t-shirt, green army jacket, combat boot wearing girl. Back in the day.
Yep.
You always knew Sean because you see that green jacket and those combat boots, those army boots, whatever they were army boots.
They're my combat boots.
Yeah, they were combat boots that she always wore, and she'd get in there with the best of them. That's for sure. And she was a little itty bitty thing too. It's not like she was some big bruising girl. I mean, she's a little skinny, strong.
But I had a hell of a left
hook. Right. So, what was it like being a bouncer at tracks?
It was good. Again, you had a family. You had a very strong family. You always had somebody watching your back, but at the same time,
our hairdresser buddy,
Vince Wolf.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
There's a story.
And what do you do?
Okay, so we were gonna get this later, but we'll get to this story. So one of the guys who used to bounce there was a real good friend of all of ours named Vince, and we were at the Concrete Blonde show, and all of us were there, and the singer had requested all the bouncers line up in the front to keep people back from the stage, all right? And then as they're playing, she tried to make an example of the bouncers, and she's trying to she was kind of being a dick to them.
She's using them.
And she was using them, and she pointed out, and she was using them like a stage prop. And she was like telling the crowd to calm down. And, you know, we shouldn't have to have all these bouncers there. And she was kind of
bouncers she put there.
The bouncers that she put there, she started talking crap about. And then she pointed at her buddy Vince, and she's like, "What do you do besides be a big mean bouncer?"
And you have to understand, Vince is like this huge, total fucking massive
ripped, big
tank of a guy, long curly hair.
Yeah. And she asked him what he did during the daytime. And there's like about 2,000 people in this place.
Right.
And all at the same time they screamed,
"He's a hairdresser!"
And you could have heard a pin drop.
Yep.
Like everything stopped, there was nothing. She didn't know what to do. She was stunned. The guitar player was laughing. The drummer put his head down and was laughing. And she's like, And then they just rolled into the next song. But it was like the best mic drop moment ever. And I'll never forget that to this day.
Nope.
I mean, it was just like the funniest thing in the world. So that's a pretty good story from
Such a sweetheart too, man.
Yeah, he was a good dude.
Big tank, but a hell of a bouncer. But yeah, that was, you know, it was a great job. It really was a great job. And you also got to meet, I was having this conversation the other day with another person who works security there. People don't understand that you sit there and you meet all these bands. And, you know, years later, you know, you're talking about, I met this person, I met that person, I've known this. But you talk about it as a memory, just something that you did. And it's not anything that you're bragging about or anything. It's just you're reminiscing, or it's just something so common for you because you did it so often. And people are like, "You did what? What? No, you didn't." And you're like,
well,
yeah.
And Tracks was like the home away from home for everybody. Like that was for us as a band, and for everybody, that was like the place to go. That was like, you know, if you weren't at somebody's house, you were at Tracks.
Right.
And it was a very intimate setting for the musicians and the people that hung out with the musicians, because even the big top bands, if you were guys that played in that town and you were friends with the guys that played in that town, you got to meet those people.
Yeah, and they're just like you and I.
Yeah, and they were very and they actually liked it because we didn't treat them like some famous person.
No.
We just treat them like one of the family and another person that loves what we love to do. And I mean, good grief, Overkill came back to our house.
Oh yeah, right.
I mean, those guys were like, "Hey, we're here for the night," and we're like, "Come on over." And after the show, they were at our house.
Yeah,
you know?
and that was pretty common, not just with us, with Grip and everything like that, but with some other bands at other times and stuff. And I actually got a couple gigs working. I worked security at Twisters and at Flood Zone too, and I got to meet Lemmy.
That had to be cool.
Yeah, and it was, but it was really laid back, just like you and I are talking right now. And,
just down to earth.
Right, and that's pretty much par for the course with most of the bands, I would say, that came through tracks as well.
There were very few bands that were stuck on themselves, and ironically, there's some bands that you would have thought would have been that way that weren't, and the ones that you thought might be that way weren't.
Right.
You know, they're like the guys that you thought were going to be like dicks were like some of the nicest guys in the world, and the guys that you thought wouldn't be dicks were like total assholes.
Right, all the way.
It was kind of like the whole polar opposite, you know, of how it went. And
I had a great time with the Ramones. That was a fucking bomb, and it was so cherry. It wasn't even funny.
So, what were some of the bands, like the local bands and stuff that you liked back then? Like, what were some of the
Well, I mean, Hedonistic Cravings, without a doubt, you know, and of course you can't talk about Hedonistic without, you know, talking about Decrepit Tomb and Nerve No Pain, and then of course that progressing into Bella Morte, you know, because those guys are just, of course, Bella Morte is still going so strong today.
Yeah, that was some of the bands that really came in, and then Private Property was from Waynesboro, and then those are the guys that gave us our band Grip. I mean, we met. I remember Vince brought them to our show at Pete's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we'd seen them play and used to go see them play, but I'd never met them. And then Vince was really good friends with them and said, "You guys got to come see these guys." And so they came over the mountain and saw us play. And after they saw us play, they asked us to do their CD release party. Mm-hmm. And then that was this crazy, massive show. And then after that, it just went...
Right.
And next thing you know, they had us opening for them all over the place. And that was a really cool thing to have happen. But those bands like Hedonistic and Decrepit Tomb and Nerve No Pain and Private Property and us, you know, Grip and stuff, we all, like, circulated and played together. It was all this thing. And we did so many shows together. And then, like... Of Dying Dreams from Greensboro used to come up, and the way back then, you traded off shows.
Right.
Like, guys would come up here and play, and you'd give them a gig, and they'd open up for you, and then you'd go down to wherever they were from and open up for them, and it was vice versa, and you swapped out shows, and it was this whole...
You always had, like, Medusa was always there.
Right.
You know, and then before all of that, like, when I was sneaking out of the house and stuff, very tail end, like, with Danny and Larry Houchins, and then we had Lackey Die, and stuff like that, you know, and in the earlier days when I was really young, there were just some really great bands, and then even going up after that, you know, when you had Tokyo Rose and stuff like that, you had Riot Act, and when you talk about Bella Morte, you've got, you know, Tony and stuff like that with Riot Act, and there was just so many great... Yes. Charlottesville... We had so many great bands that came into Charlottesville and came through Charlottesville, but we had a shitload of great bands that came from Charlottesville.
Yes. A lot of people don't realize that Dave Matthews isn't the only band that like rocked this town. As a matter of fact, there was bands that were really rocking this town before Dave Matthews was Dave Matthews.
So Dave Matthews, I worked... When Dave Matthews was playing on, I think it was 10 Cent Tuesdays, 10 Cent Drafts, because he couldn't get anybody to come in, and that's when they were playing.
Right.
And then somehow, magically, Korn worked his magic, and they got...
Korn Capshaw worked his magic, and now Dave Matthews is who they are today. But there was so many really great bands that people don't realize that how many really awesome bands were coming up in the 90s and stuff there, and that were playing and doing so well, and just... they weren't getting that big national recognition. There's like a tier. There's like the beginning level, there's this middle level, and then there's the top level. And there's a lot of these bands that were stuck in that middle level that should have went here.
Yeah. But
just because the right whatever didn't show up at the right time or whatever, they just never could step into that next threshold of where they wanted to go. And that's the music industry show. It's a fight and it's a struggle. And a lot of times, if you guys look at music today, there's a lot of bands that should never be national bands because they're horrible. Yeah.
There was some other really good bands too that came out of Charlottesville or came through, but that went on to do some good stuff too. And again, this was back in like the mid to late 80s. You think about like Beef People when you think about Baby Opaque, and of course I saw Rebuta quite a few times at tracks, and you know, they went on to CBGBs and played.
Were you there when Green Apple Quickstep came?
No.
They were a band from Seattle, and I don't know what happened to them, but man, they were good. They were good. It was grunge. I mean, it was along that lines of like Soundgarden, Alice in Chains type stuff, with a little bit of White Zombie mixed in, and they were good. I mean, they were really good. Had a female bass player that was phenomenal.
Wow.
And Don was all over after the show. Don was like, boom, stuck to her, drunk as can be.
Yeah.
Just smiling and talking smack, you know. And she was small, but he was shorter than her. It was kind of funny. But they were such a great band, and there was so many bands like that would come in that you may not have heard would come in there that were really, really good bands. You know, that's what I miss about that venue.
It was such a great venue. I found this site I was looking at the other day that was just all about venues, and it had like a whole list. It wasn't complete, but it was a whole list of like shows from beginning to end. And I remember looking at it and seeing like one of the very first bands that ever played at Trax when they opened was Ag Front. It was Agnostic Front, and they were like babies,
right,
you know?
Right.
And I was like, wow, man, that's cool as shit. And then I was talking to Paul Bento the other night on the phone, and he was the guitarist for Carnivore, and he remembers coming in sometime in the 2000s with one of his bands and playing at Trax. Right. And I was like, just to think about that Trax was so well known.
There's
not
so
just
many
here.
big bands that played there that you wouldn't think would have played at Trax that came through there. I mean, Corrosion Conformity played there. You know, Typo Negative played there. I did get to open for them, by the way.
Yeah.
That was cool.
That was with a Narrow Way.
Yeah, it was a different deal, but it was cool. That was a little 45-minute, wow, I got to do that.
Right.
And I will say this, those guys, God rest Peter Steele, those guys were super cool.
And his anniversary of his death is coming up.
Super cool, and it was really a privilege to not only get to open for those guys, but actually get to hang out with them. And it was a band that I always really liked. So to get that opportunity to hang out with them and talk to them and kind of just see what they were really like in person was really cool. And that was the cool thing about Trax. You know, they had a list, and if bands would come and needed to open in a band, they would go down the list of the local bands, whoever was available. Sometimes you get that slot, so that was kind of a cool thing that they would do.
Yeah, for sure.
So that was a pretty cool deal. So,
and I got married on stage at Trax.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Tell us that story.
I don't know if I can remember. My first husband, Wingnut, we were both bouncers there, and so we got married on stage in between bands, and like. You know how they do like the whole thing where they hold the swords up on both sides, and so all the bouncers held their mag blades up. And we got married on stage there.
Yeah. Boy, if that backstage could talk.
Oh, tell me about it. The stories
that the backstage in the area could tell is a little crazy. But so what kind of music are you into now? Like what bands do you like now? Besides the guys you're managing. You know,
to be honest, I'm so old school. I still like all the same bands. I mean, I still love. You know,
that's when music was real.
And it's not the same nowadays. You know,
digital.
I still love Motorhead, and I still love Bauhaus, and I still love Carnivore and Typo, and shit, even going back to Fallout. You know, anything Peter Steele I love. Let's put it that way. But not just him, but the guys that he played with. You know, Carnivore. I've always loved Carnivore. But I have a wide range of music. I love bluegrass, I love classical.
I like a lot of different stuff.
I love any type of ska and oi, big into oi, punk all the way. If it's Casualties or the Exploited, DRI, Misfits. I like some Misfits. I love when
Dig Up Her Bones is my song.
When Glenn was with him, I loved him. I
like that song.
Mike Hideous, he toured with Misfits in 1998. He did a South American tour and a European tour with them. One of the most successful times that the Misfits ever had. And he's actually the lead singer for the band that I manage.
Cool.
Momento Morti.
Well, let's fast forward to that. Let's fast forward to how did you go from all that and working at Trax to now you manage bands? Let's hear that story. How did you become a band manager?
I took that 20-year hiatus and did the whole domestic,
got married, spit out the kids, had the white picket fence, and then got divorced.
Kind of ish, not quite, but yeah, I did that. Went to
No white picket fence. It was black.
No.
It had skulls on it.
high school dropout, but ended up getting accepted into a college and went on and got a couple of undergrad degrees and a master's degree, and raised up my son from my first marriage and 4 stepkids, which are my kids as well, and they're all successful adults and everything now. My son, of course, has autism, and he's the bomb. He's amazing. But they're all 20 plus in years, and now, it's just, we lost a lot of people this past year from our old crew.
Oh yeah, we did.
Too many. It's always too many, but more than too many this past year. And then back on September 1st, lost a friend, Noah, and Noah was there when my son was born. He was there, and it just hit home. He was a lot younger than me, and he was like the last in a long line. Of course, that was September 1st, and then Don passed away in November, and it was like another one. I was like,
rest in peace, Don.
Right, and I was like, you know what? I can't do this whole, saying hi on Facebook and scrolling through. I need to start reaching out to the old crew, and I need to start talking to people and seeing them in person and calling them and checking in and seeing how people are doing for real. And I hooked up and I've been talking to Andy Dean on Facebook and stuff, but I got to go see him and sit and chat for a while, and just discussing how we needed to get together, get everybody together, and have a thing where we talk about the memories like we are right now, and talk about each other while we're still alive and not at a funeral. Because when we see each other, it's like we just saw each other yesterday for lunch, even though it's been 25 or 30 years.
Oh yeah, I know, right? Start rambling.
Because we all meant that much to each other. Because we all were that family for each other. For so many of us, sometimes it was the only family we had at the time. And that's why it's, when we reconnect, it's so easy to fall right back into that family that we had, for a lot of us. And what I found out when I started reaching out to people, that there were a lot of us who were either feeling the same way or desperately in need of it. And it really picked up a lot of people who were in some pretty dark places, and who are now doing better because of having those reconnections, not just with myself, but with reconnecting a bunch of us together.
So is that how you came across the guys that you're managing now?
Well, that's what brought me back into, I don't know how to say this, stepping out of where I was, and stepping back into the music scene, and back into all of us again, which just lifted my own self back up. And then in doing that and getting back involved in the music, with COVID going on and stuff, you had a lot of, like on Instagram and stuff like that, I was starting to hear some bands that I'd never heard before, especially some bands from other countries that maybe would never have been heard by us, in any time, but only had the option of using social media now because of COVID. And ran across a couple that I really liked, and so I would kind of give them a little bit of a promotion type deal, just because I liked them, And I like writing. I like wording things certain ways. And this guy, Tony Marr, came across some of the stuff that I've been writing, and I guess he really liked it, and he started talking to me about it and asked me to do some work for him, and ended up hiring me, and it just kind of grew from there, and I ended up managing. He hired me on as a manager.
Hold that on. So anyway, sorry about that. Camera decided to cut off. So he ended up hiring you as a manager?
Yeah, he ended up hiring me as a manager for Momento Morti, and then Originally, it was as social media manager, and then that kind of grew to doing other kinds of marketing and booking, and then hiring me on as road manager, and now as a full-fledged, all in with the band and managing, and
that's
always
just, like, crazy. That's like just
yeah.
You dive back in, you're reaching out to old friends, and then next thing you know, you're managing a band. So
and now he has 3 other projects going on, and so he just hired me on for those 3 projects as well.
So that's pretty cool. So what was it like to do all that?
Oh, it's amazing.
Is it awesome?
It's incredible.
We won't get into the details, but you dig it?
I love it. We've got tours booked. We've got one tour for Brazil coming up, and then we're doing a European tour next year, and
so
I can't wait. Oh my God, I can't wait.
Yeah. So you get to go with them for all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Oh, so that's gonna be cool.
Oh yeah.
You get to see some other cool countries and cool people that are way better to play for than some people around here.
Yeah, it'll be, and really great bands and festivals too, big festivals.
That's cool. That's awesome. That's cool that it just kind of rolled into that, and next thing you know, you're like, boom, now you made it. And now you're starting to pick up some other things now that you can't quite talk about yet, but are in the works, which is really cool. So that's going to be
some heavy hitters,
for another time.
Yeah,
so that's super cool though. I mean, I just think it's pretty amazing that you went from hitchhiking to go see shows at tracks to working at tracks to taking a break and doing the whole family thing, and then getting back into and diving back into it, and then all of a sudden fate would have it brings you back in, and now you're managing bands and stuff. That's a pretty cool way to have your life kind of spin, and kind of happens at the right time when you really need it. You know what I mean? Desperately
needed it. I was diagnosed with MS a few years back, and I'll put it this way. What I'm finding is that the best medicine I could possibly have is music. Yeah. And it has become everything for me.
It's healthy. It's
really
something that you love. When you love something, it makes you healthy. I do have a question though. What is it like trying to book a tour, especially when you're booking a tour overseas? Like, I know it's got to be easier trying to book one in the States than it is trying to book it in like Brazil or South America.
Right, and so that's where our guitarist, the guy that hired me, who's also my boss, really comes in handy because, again, newer bands but seasoned professionals. And
so they've already done that. So
he's done the tours. He not only has he already done these tours, but he's already played in these venues. So he already has all these connections.
He's got that established.
He makes it very easy for me.
Oh, well, that's cool.
And these guys are so awesome to work with. I mean, you couldn't ask for a better group of guys to work with.
And now they all live in different places, though.
Oh, yeah.
They don't all live... Like, understand that these guys, each one of them lives in a different state, and they still coordinate... Or different country.
Yeah.
And they coordinate through the internet, with music and everything, and then they bring it all together. And then they probably have a short little practice window before they go hit the stage with what they just wrote or whatever they did. They do a lot of nowadays is, I write a riff, I send it to the bass player adds his riff to it, he sends it to the drummer, or the drummer vice versa. And then they send it to the singer, and then it all gets meshed together.
And a lot of Skype. Yeah, and that helps a lot, because at least then you have the face-to-face
you can kind of have together. You can have your camera up there, and you can jam and watch each other and be like, that sucked, I heard that.
Right, exactly.
Fix that. So it's so different, because back in the day, you had to be in that band space. Like, there was no... Hell, we didn't have cell phones back then, I mean, cell phones were just starting up back then. It wasn't...
And I still think that that's preferred. I mean, the studio is always going to be your best place to be. That's where your happy accents, as Bob Ross would say.
I would rather play in a room with everybody all the time than send stuff back and forth, because it is... When you're playing together... in the middle of a song or something, you'll come up with something that is that little bridge or that little note or that little few bars that you needed to make that song that great song, and it's really hard to do that over the computer and that same interaction. You don't get the same interaction when you're in the room together.
Yeah, and you don't build that energy.
Yeah,
you don't have the energy that you have when you have everybody together playing. But we'll get back to that. It'll happen.
Hope so.
It will. We'll get back to that.
I'll be glad when you can actually go play and they can have actual bands playing again and not all this, we're gonna do a virtual concert. Woohoo!
No, it's happening. My guitarist right now, we were talking right before I got here, and he was going on stage. So.
Oh, that's a good thing. Yeah, that's a good thing. Yeah, because the virtual shows, I mean, standing there playing in front of the camera and you got no crowd is like standing in your band room looking at your wall.
Yeah, right. It's going well. I mean, we've got Memento Morti's got the first singles coming out, like I said, on April 30th, and then May 15th we got the second one.
And where are you going to be able to get all that stuff at?
Oh, it'll be out everywhere.
Everywhere, like Spotify and all that. All the normal outlets that you can get.
We'll have it on Apple Music, Spotify, Bandcamp, everywhere.
Now there's a website for those guys. Mm-hmm. They're on Facebook,
Instagram, Facebook, Twitter,
all the social media. So you definitely should go check that
and
out.
so the website is Momento Morti, and it's Memento MOMENTO MORTI 777.com. And so it's the same thing for everything, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The website is all going to be with a 777 at the end. And then May 15th, I think, is the second release.
Cool.
And then, so our bassist and our drummer, everybody also has their own bands that they're in as well.
Stuff.
Right. So our bassist and our drummer, they're from a band out of Pensacola, Florida, called October Noir. Exceptional band. If you have the chance to go listen to them at all, our bassist Tom Noir, he's the vocalist and the bassist for that band. Absolutely exceptional vocals, and the music that he writes is just above and beyond. The drummer is just got mad skills, and then of course our vocalist is Mike Kidius, and I mentioned before that he had toured with the Misfits, but I think even more important than that is that he was one of the pioneers of the American goth movement back in the 1990s.
Oh, wow.
With his band, The Empire Hideous.
Cool.
Absolutely exceptional band. And then, of course, he had another side band that he did called Spy Society 99. And then when you're talking about Overkill, he and Dee Dee Verney had a side project called the Bronx Casket Company, which he did the first 3 albums with them.
Awesome.
Absolutely amazing. But Empire Hideous still has stuff out that they're still doing, so it's really good. And then my boss, the guitarist, Tony Marr, he's got a band called Ministry of Noise, and then he's got a solo project so I manage Ministry of Noise and the solo project that he's doing, Tony Marr project, and then he's working on putting out a new punk band called We Are Prozac. That's my mom.
Right in the middle of the interview, Mom's calling.
Yeah, you're 50, but
we're listening to Jefferson's over there.
That's because it's my mom.
That was funny. That was priceless.
You should wait till my dad calls. That'll probably be in 5 minutes.
That was funny.
But so he's got Ministry of Noise. He's got the punk band he's doing, which is We Are Prozac, and then for Memento Morti, all of our songs are being produced by Paul Bento, who's a guitarist for Carnivore.
Oh, cool.
With Peter Steele, and then of course he was in the band Whiplash. Great band, and they opened for, if you remember when Morgan Harrington went missing here in Charlottesville.
Oh, right.
At the Metallica concert, Whiplash opened for Metallica that night.
That was crazy.
Yeah.
I remember that though.
Yeah. But Paul Bento is he's exceptional. He's a master sitar player. In fact, on Bloody Kisses, the Typo Negative album, Bloody Kisses. Yeah, if you hear the song "Can't Lose You," you hear the sitar playing, and that's Paul Bento.
Oh, that's cool.
Doing that. Yeah, he's incredible, and incredible to talk to as well. Just a very well balanced, incredible person, as well as an amazing guitarist.
So that's a lot of bands you guys need to go look up now, because you just rambled off so much stuff.
Sorry.
And you need to start getting on YouTube and clicking some buttons and doing all that stuff.
So look up Tony Marr, October Noir, The Empire Hideous, and Mike Hideous, and which you can do on YouTube at Mike Zone on YouTube, and Mike is with a Y, MYKE, and Paul Bento Music on SoundCloud.
So that's freaking awesome. I mean, so there's something for everyone out there to understand that, you never give up on things that you love, because you never know what's going to come your way and how it's going to turn around. And I mean,
absolutely.
I think about like where I've been. I mean, in my life, you know, I started off doing one thing. I was in the military. I mean, I played in a band for a long time, and then that kind of went south. And then I ended up having this military career for a long time, but I never stopped playing. And now I'm back to having, you know, back in the music, you know, really now. And I've got this crazy studio now, and I'm trying to go back to doing that and doing those shows again. And you can't ever just give up on your dreams and your passions. You just can't let it go. I mean, here's a perfect example of somebody that, you know, kind of went away from that for a while and then walked back into it, and then boom, now she's doing something that she loves in an industry that she loves and very passionate, and you're happy, and it can happen for you at any time. You just never know when that lightning's going to strike, and it's going to be like, boom, here you go, here's what you need. And you know, I know, you know, she's been going through some crazy stuff with her diabetes things and stuff, and it's been rough, and she's still, you know, plugging away, because we tried to do this interview
a couple weeks
ago, and she had to go back to the hospital instead of. I mean, she was really bad off. Still showed up to try to do the interview.
Yes, tried.
She tried.
I made it in the house.
She made it in the house, and then she had to go back. It was kind of, you know, it was.
I don't give up, man. I will not give up.
But she's still trucking along, and I think it's really impressive and says a lot about you and being a strong person. And,
it's the music.
And doing what you love.
It's the music. Like I said, I'm passionate about the music, and I don't
music is healing. I don't care what you say. And whatever music you guys like out there, it's healing. You can't tell me there's not songs out there that don't make you feel better and make you feel about stuff.
So my master's is in counseling, and I did a lot of research, and one of the big papers that I wrote on for the end at the end of my master's was on music, and I with the MS and stuff like that, and there's a lot of pain, chronic pain associated with MS. There's music, and it doesn't even matter what, you know, everybody thinks, okay, music has to be meditative and calm and that kind of music, but it doesn't. It's music that works for you.
Right.
So like for me, if you know, I'm not feeling good and I have a massive migraine, if I can throw in some old school punk, I'm like, that's helpful to me. You know, a little bit of Motorhead or you know, some death metal. You know, it produces opium in your brain.
Right.
And it is the exact same chemical compounds as the opioids that you would get in a narcotic pain medication.
There you go. So, listen to music, quit taking drugs.
That's right. You know, and I actually discussed that with my doctor, and that's one of the reasons why music therapy works so well for people.
Right. I tell you, I mean, it's music was something that, you know, as a guy that served overseas and fought in the wars, man, music was a lifesaver to all of us over there. I mean, it was literally what kept you sane.
Right.
You know, so there's definitely truth in that for 100%. So definitely agree. So. Yeah, so can't complain. So we're going to wrap this up, guys. It was awesome. Oh, wait, she's got some. She's like, I got some else.
Wait, I wanted to also mention, I was talking about October Noir. We were talking about Peter Steele and that his anniversary of, I don't like to call it an anniversary, but the day marking 11 years, I think. Is that right? 11 years since he passed away?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's 11 years. Coming up, I think it's April 14th, is October Noir is releasing a really well done cover, exceptionally well done cover of Love You to Death on April 14th. Cool. So if you have a chance, it's not something you want to miss. This comes from people who actually knew Peter Steele personally, to listen to our bassist, the bassist and lead singer for October Noir, saying he has, the only person I've ever heard who has the same range that Peter Steele, as close as you could possibly get.
Yeah, that's a tough one to knock out.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
And he does. And so if you get the chance to listen to that on October Noir Music on Facebook, and
check
Noir
it out.
is Noir. So October Noir Music on Facebook, April 14th. They're going to release the video for that cover of Love You to Death.
Definitely check it out. Well, thanks for coming and talking to us, and I hope this is something cool for you guys out there that might be interested in falling into what she fell into. And
you never know what's around the corner.
You never know what's around the corner and how it's going to you. And I'm sure she's going to be on the show more because we're going to be hanging out more.
And I miss you.
Yeah, I know. And maybe she'll be nice enough to manage my band once it finally gets back together. And help us out. But I really appreciate you coming on. Thank you.
Man,
love
thank you
to
for
death.
having me.
And so glad to have you. And
Love you to death.
And I do love you to death.
No, it's a good love you to death.
All right.
This song.
Yeah. But
No pun
check
intended.
out her band, check out those bands, check out all the bands you spewed
Yeah,
out and stuff,
please.
and check them out. I mean, maybe you guys will find some bands that you actually like and you're into. And this isn't some, we don't do no pop stuff in this. This is all about rock and roll and metal and all kinds of stuff like that.
Know it.
Right? Yeah. You want to listen to some, what is it, what's her name? Britney Spears up in here, up in the house. You want some Britney Spears up in the house? The Hey? Yeah. All right, guys. We're going to get out of here. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. Do me a favor. Like, subscribe, hit that ding dong. All the things you got to do for YouTube, all that stuff. Check out her. Check out her bands. Check out all that stuff. And just get out there, listen to some music. Get out there, play. Do what you got to do. Go see some shows. Have some fun and live your life, man. We'll see you guys on the next one.
Horns up.
Horns up. Hey, there's some fun. Perfect.
Awesome, man. I loved it.